Chapter 29. Papa rarely took advantage of a guarantee. He felt that taking anything back to a store was an admission of his inadequacy or a reflection on his resourcefulness. By God, if I can't fix it. However, on the morning after our great rowing fiasco, it seemed that times were changing. Before we got out of bed, we heard thumping on the stairs, followed by the slamming of the basement door. We figured that Papa was on his way to the boat store, motor in one hand, guarantee in the other. We breathed a prayer of gratitude, turned over, and went back to dreaming. In a short order, however, our dreams were interrupted by a great uproar out back, clanking, banging, and quacking. By the time we arrived on the scene, the sun was shining brightly, and Papa was leaning over an old door that he used for an impromptu work table when he was tinkering. A hose was running into the rain barrel nearby. By thunder, it doesn't take a mechanical genius to know how to adjust a motor. The uproar soon brought out the neighborhood boys. Dunny McNabb, looking more shallow than ever, was cranky from having been awoken before noon on a Saturday. "You got a new motor, huh? How does it run?" "It don't run," I said, cranky about my handful of blisters from the previous night. "It can't even walk yet." Portis was spouting the common neighborhood gripe. "When are you going to get rid of your ducks?" Robbie McNabb arrived. "Yeah, they wake me up every morning." No one doubted that. His bedroom was right over our backyard. "My mother says they stink," Port said. Flora was cranky because of her blisters, too. "My mother says you're not supposed to use the word stink. And my mother says that your mother is not supposed to use the word stink either." Port scoffed. "My mother says that your mother is not supposed to tell her what words to use, and she can use the word stink if she wants. She wouldn't have to use the word stink if your ducks didn't stink up the whole neighborhood." One would have supposed that the offensive word had received its due. But Dorr, still suffering indigestion from drinking all the hot cocoa in the boat, introduced the subject that was a top concern of every resident who lived near Lake Washington. "Why does the lake stink, Papa?" Papa was busy checking the rain barrel, so the boy supplied the answer. "It stinks because all the ducks that swim in the lake poop all the time, just like your ducks," Port said. Robbie had an idea. "Are you going to take the ducks out in your boat and let them swim in the lake?" Papa turned off the hose. The subject was of great concern to him. "I can see the day when the swimming beaches may have to be closed if something isn't done about the pollution in the lake." "Isn't that what they have the chlorine boat for?" Dunny asked. Papa explained. "The chlorine boat is just a temporary measure. The reason the lake stinks is that for years, people have used it as a sewer. That was fine until the population outgrew the system. Now we've got a real problem, and if something isn't done..." "What can be done, Papa?" Dorr asked. Robbie had the solution. "Everybody's got to stop pooping." From there, the conversation developed into world problems, about which we had similar solutions. It continued, along with Papa's tinkering, until Mrs. McNabb called out the window, "Duncan, Robert, come home for lunch." Papa brightened. "Portis, your mother wants you to come home for lunch, too." Port left with one last suggestion. "If you want to find out how it runs, Mr. Bigham, you should put it in that barrel." Papa gritted his teeth and headed for the house. Mama had called us into lunch as well. That afternoon, everyone gathered once again to watch Papa fasten the motor to the side of the rain barrel. Port spouted, "Guess what, Mr. Bigham? My mom didn't want me to come home after all." "Well, you'd better keep your trap shut or she's going to want you home right now." We all kept our traps shut. Papa twisted the crank, and zip! The motor gave a belch, puffed up a cloud of smoke, and began splashing water all over us. Papa acted like a boy who had just caught his first fish. Papa put the motor in the car, and we headed back to the boathouse. It began as a rerun of day one. Papa cranked, Flora and I rowed, and Dorr drank hot chocolate. Around evening, however, someone must have said the magic word. Old Whooping Cough gave a puff, and we were off. With that, we had become members of the boating fraternity. Papa took us out often, zooming across the water, or idling in the middle of the lake while we dove off the deck and swam about. As we cruised along the shore, he would point out landmarks. "That's the house we drive by on Lake Washington Boulevard, but from there we see the back of the house. Here we can see the front." We were able to see other motorboats up close, including the Thompsons. One day, we spotted it zooming towards us, followed by an unusually large spray. "What's it got dragging behind?" Flora asked. We watched, spellbound. "They've got a surfboard," Papa explained. "What's a surfboard?" Dorr asked. "Whatever it is, it's wearing Robert Thompson's swimsuit," I observed. We immediately began campaigning. Why can't we get a surfboard, Papa? It was a bad time to bring up getting anything new. With the depression upon us, Papa had been preaching about the need to save money. The best example he could think of was for Mama to desist from buying any more $30 shoes. Instead, she should stay home and can food. With plenty of fruit and a 100-pound sack of oatmeal, we should make it through the winter. We complained about being forced to spend the whole summer in the basement at the canning table. One day while we were peeling apples, Papa appeared with a carpenter's pencil over his ear. "I've got to go to Hillman for some lumber and bolts. Is there anything you need?" "Yeah, we need help," Flor said. "And if you're going to bring more fruit, I'll need more jar lids," Mama called out. "We don't need more fruit," I groaned. "We still got a railroad car full," Dor moaned. Papa disappeared out the door. I was helping Mama with the jars. "Inspect the jars carefully," Mama cautioned. "There mustn't be any roughness around the sealing edges." "I know," I said, running my finger around the sealing edge. "We have to keep out the molds and the yeasts and the bacterias." It was something we had heard from Mama for years. Flor had laid down her knife and was eating a piece of an apple. "I wonder how they get up on a surfboard." "Who? The molds, the yeasts, or the bacterias?" I asked. "The Thompson boys, dummy." "They just stand up on their back legs," Dor said. "They can cause serious illness," Mama said. "The Thompson boys?" asked Dor. "Yeah," I said, "if they get into the jars." "And if they get in the jars, we could wake up dead after breakfast," Dor said. I didn't like the job of inspector. I agonized over sending the whole family to a painful death via a jar of applesauce. I kept calling for a double check until Mama, tired of having to run from the boiling kettle, said, "I think they're all fine, Franny." I could never be sure, so I went on agonizing. Papa passed the table, loaded with lumber and hardware. "Looks like you've still got half a train left." Soon we became aware of ripping sounds coming from his work area. Ma'am called out, "I don't think canning and cabinet making go well together, Roy. You're making a cloud of dust." "Yeah, we're liable to get sawdust into the jars, along with the molds, yeasts, and Thompson boys," Dor said. "I'm not making a cabinet," Papa said. "With all that lumber and bolts, what are you making?" "Well, what have we been hearing about all summer?" "Molds," Flor said. "Yeasts," I said. "Bacterias," Dor said. "To say nothing of the Thompson boys," Mama added. "Oh, I thought that we'd been hearing about a surfboard," Papa replied. "A surfboard, yippee!" 3 days later, all the apples had been jarred, the surfboard had been varnished, and we were in the boat, ready for our trial run. As we were pushing off, Papa threw us a package. "Here's your equipment." "Equipment?" Dor tore off the wrappings and held up 3 brown canvas objects. "Water wings?" she groaned. We hadn't been strapped into a pair since our dog paddle days. I asked a dumb question. "Who's going to wear water wings?" "Well, let's be scientific," Papa said, assuming his scientific look. "How many pairs are there?" We didn't need science to tell us what he was getting at. "But Papa, what will people think when they see the Bigham girls surfboarding with water wings?" "They'll think that the Bigham girls' old man finally got a little sense. The Thompson boys don't wear water wings. That's because the Thompson boys' old man doesn't have much sense." Surf-winging, as we called it, was bad enough when Papa kept to the uninhabited areas. But after we got to the point where we could swing out over the waves and do tricks, such as all 3 of us riding together, Papa wanted to show us off. He would buzz around the beach where our friends were swimming. I felt like Ma Taylor. That's what made me what I am today. Nervous. Another thing that made me what I am today was Papa's method of dealing with a downed surfer. Instead of circling and coming in close so we could reboard, Papa would release the surfboard. This way you have something to hang on to. We questioned Papa's timing more than his theory. He was inclined to be trigger-happy, and eventually we didn't dare to even raise a hand for a friendly wave for fear that Papa would suspect that we were off balance and release the board. As Dor said, if we keep falling on our faces, something's going to break. Flor, who had just had braces installed, agreed. "Yeah, I'll finally get my dumb braitheth off, and then I'll fall on the board and knock out my front teeth." When winter came, Papa began having further dark thoughts about the depression. He decided he would save money on boathouse fees, so he built a boat trailer out of an old car axle and pulled the boat home. The next summer, he decided that he had invested so much in the trailer that he would save further boathouse fees and just launch from the trailer. From then on, preparing for an outing was like raising and lowering the Titanic. It provoked our usual comments. "I think I'm getting female trouble." Max summed it up quite well. Looks like you're not getting much rest and relaxation in your boat, Roy. Then he made a statement that was to ruin our boating fun forever. You probably should have bought that cruiser. The next day, Papa came home loaded with bundles. He handed Mama a roll of white and green striped canvas and gave her instructions, then gathered up some tools and went out to the boat. We three little Bighams hung over the sides, asking questions. You'll have to wait and see. First, he removed one seat in the middle section. Too much sitting gives the barnacles a chance to grow, he laughed. Then he took out his brace and bit, and began boring holes near the transom. We inched closer, fascinated with the little curls of wood that came winding out from around the bit. Papa gathered a few and strung them in our hair. I felt like a beautiful princess. I swore that when I got big I would buy myself a brace and bit and twirl out millions of lovely curls. I was suddenly brought back to reality by the sight of 4 gangly pipes sticking up into the air, and Flora's question, "Is it going to be a top?" Papa ignored the question, but Dora and I didn't. "We don't want a top," Mama confirmed our suspicions. She arrived with the canvas, and the fitting began. We were repulsed. However, Papa was not finished with the indignities. He unwrapped the last package, a green canvas mattress, and spread it out in the bottom of the boat. Now Mama can take her afternoon nap while she waits for the boat to start. "It looks like an old-fashioned bed with a roof on it," we moaned. Mama corrected us. "You mean a 4-poster bed." This didn't please Papa. It sounded like she was siding with us girls again. He went away singing, "My bonnie lies over the ocean, my bonnie lies over the sea." Our trip from then on helped us understand compromise. We cruised along the shore, with the boat gorged with everything including the kitchen sink. Just an expression, of course. Papa hadn't installed plumbing of any sort. The only positive was that Papa decided that, now that the boat went so slow, he could allow us to take it out on our own. He taught Flora how to run the motor, gave us the usual warnings, and shoved us off. What Flora had written to Mother was correct. She knew how to run the motor. Better than Papa, we figured, even though she was only 15. That was probably because she set the throttle to max. With the lightened boat going at top speed, Dora and I had to crouch up front and hang onto the canopy poles. We always feared that the whole shebang would burst its screws and go sailing off with us attached. That would be more fun than a surfboard, Dora figured.